The sound of snapping wood cracked through the humid afternoon air like a gunshot, freezing everyone in Centennial Park. It wasn't just a stick. It was a lifeline. 72-year-old Beatrice Washington stood trembling, her white cane lying in splintered ruin at her feet, crushed under the polished boot of Officer Rick Sterling. He smirked, his badge gleaming in the sun, thinking he was just cleaning up the streets from a loitering nuisance. He had no idea that the woman he just humiliated wasn't just a helpless senior citizen. She was the mother of the man who signed his paychecks and held the power to end his career with a single phone call. This is the story of a bully who picked the wrong fight, and the brutal, swift justice that followed. The humidity in Chicago that Tuesday was stifling, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer above the asphalt and stuck shirts to backs. For Beatrice Washington, the heat was a physical weight, pressing down on her shoulders as she navigated the familiar path along the edge of Centennial Park. She moved with the cautious, practiced grace of someone who had lived in darkness for 20 years. Her white cane, tipped with red, swept back and forth in a rhythmic arc, tap, tap, slide, tap, tap, slide. Beatrice, known to her neighbors in the South Side as Miss B, was a fixture of the community. At 72, she possessed a quiet dignity that commanded respect without demanding it. She wore a simple floral dress, her grey hair pulled back in a neat bun, and oversized sunglasses that hid eyes clouded by severe glaucoma. Today, she was on her way to the local bakery to pick up a box of cannoli for her son, Andre, who was coming into town for a surprise visit. Officer Rick Sterling sat in his patrol car, the air conditioning blasting against his face. He was 34, with a buzz cut and a jawline that looked like it had been chiseled out of granite, and an ego to match. Sterling had been on the force for 8 years, long enough to grow cynical, but not long enough to learn humility. He had a reputation in the precinct, though not the kind a good cop wanted. To his buddies, he was Razor, a hardliner who didn't take guff. To the Internal Affairs Division, he was a liability with 3 excessive force complaints in the last 18 months, all of which had miraculously vanished due to insufficient evidence. Sterling watched Beatrice through his sunglasses. To him, she wasn't a grandmother on an errand. She was an obstruction. She was moving slowly near the crosswalk, hesitating as the traffic light chirped its signal. The light had turned, but a delivery truck had blocked the box, confusing the auditory signal. Beatrice paused, her cane tapping the curb, waiting for clarity. Sterling flipped on his siren, just a quick whoop-whoop to startle her. He enjoyed that. The jolt of power. Beatrice flinched, nearly losing her footing. She clutched her purse tighter to her chest. Sterling rolled down his window. "Hey, you moving or are you planting roots there?" he shouted, his voice dripping with agitation. Beatrice turned her head, trying to locate the voice. "I'm sorry, officer. The signal is confusing. Is it safe to cross?" "It's a crosswalk, not a lounge. Move it along, lady. You're blocking the flow." Beatrice nodded nervously and took a step forward, but her cane caught a crack in the uneven pavement. She stumbled slightly. It was a harmless moment, a second of vulnerability. But for Sterling, whose morning coffee had been cold and whose temper was already short, it was an excuse. He threw the car into park and slammed the door shut. The heavy thud echoed. He marched over to her, his hand resting on his belt, thumbs hooked near his taser. "I told you to move," Sterling barked, towering over her. "Now you're jaywalking. That's a citation." "Jaywalking?" Beatrice's voice trembled. "Officer, I'm on the curb. I haven't entered the street yet." "Don't get smart with me," Sterling snapped it. He grabbed her arm, his grip unnecessarily tight. Beatrice gasped, the sudden contact sending a shock of fear through her. "Please let go! You're hurting me!" "Stop resisting!" Sterling yelled, escalating the situation for the benefit of the few onlookers starting to gather. "I asked for ID. Now." "It's in my purse, please. Let me go so I can get it." "You're flailing that stick around like a weapon," Sterling lied. He looked at the white cane in her other hand. "Drop the weapon." "It's my cane! I'm blind!" Beatrice cried out, panic rising in her chest. "I need it to see." "I said drop it." Sterling didn't wait. He snatched the cane from her hand. Beatrice reached out into the empty air, her balance instantly compromised. "Please give it back! I can't navigate without it." Sterling looked at the cane, a lightweight, folding aluminum model. He sneered. "Cheap piece of junk. Probably got a knife hidden in it. I've seen it before." "It's just a cane. Please." The crowd was growing. A young woman with a stroller stopped, her mouth agape. A businessman in a grey suit paused, frowning. "Officer, that's an old lady," a construction worker shouted from across the street. "Ease up, man." "Back off," Sterling roared at the bystanders. "Police business." He looked back at Beatrice, who was now weeping softly, her hands trembling as she held them up in surrender. The sight should have evoked pity. Instead, it fueled Sterling's twisted need for dominance. He felt the eyes of the public on him, judging him. He needed to show them who was in charge. "This," Sterling said, holding the cane up like a trophy, "is a public safety hazard." With a grunt of exertion, he brought the cane down hard against his knee. The sound was sickening. The aluminum crimped and then snapped with a loud crack. The internal elastic cord held the two jagged pieces together, dangling limply like a broken limb. Beatrice screamed, a sound of pure heartbreak. It wasn't just a tool. That cane was her independence. It was her eyes, and he had just snapped it in half for no reason other than spite. Sterling tossed the broken wreckage at her feet. It clattered against the pavement. "Now," he said, pulling out his ticket book, seemingly oblivious to the horrified silence that had descended on the intersection. "Let's talk about that jaywalking ticket and disorderly conduct." Beatrice fell to her knees, her hands groping the hot concrete until she felt the jagged metal of her cane. She pulled it to her chest, sobbing. "Why? Why would you do this?" "Lesson learned," Sterling muttered, clicking his pen. "Don't ignore a lawful order." He was writing the date on the citation when a black SUV with tinted windows screeched to a halt right in the middle of the intersection, ignoring the red light. The tires smoked as the vehicle stopped inches from the crosswalk. Sterling looked up, annoyed. "Hey, you can't park there. Move it or I'll have it towed." The driver's door didn't open. Instead, the rear passenger door flew open with force. A man stepped out. He was tall, over 6'2", wearing a bespoke navy suit that cost more than Sterling made in 3 months. He wore rimless glasses, and his face was a mask of terrified fury. "Mama!" the man shouted, his voice cracking. Beatrice's head snapped up at the sound. Andre, is that you?" Sterling stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "Sir, get back in your vehicle. This is an active police investigation." The man ignored him completely. He rushed to Beatrice, dropping to his knees beside her, heedless of his expensive suit trousers on the dirty asphalt. He wrapped his arms around her. "I'm here, Mama. I'm here. Are you hurt? Did he hit you?" "He broke my cane, Andre," she wept, holding up the twisted metal. "He said I was resisting. I was just trying to cross the street." The man, Andre, looked at the broken cane, then at his mother's terrified face. His expression shifted. The worry evaporated, replaced by a cold, glacial rage that dropped the temperature on the street by 10 degrees. He slowly stood up and turned to face Officer Sterling. Sterling, realizing this guy looked important, but not recognizing him, doubled down. "I told you to step back, pal, unless you want to join her in cuffs for obstruction of justice." Andre Washington adjusted his cuffs. He didn't shout. He didn't scream. He looked at Sterling's badge number, 4922, and then looked him dead in the eye. "Officer," Andre said, his voice dangerously calm, "you have exactly 10 seconds to tell me why my blind mother is on the ground and her property is destroyed." "She was resisting," Sterling spat. "And who the hell are you? Her lawyer?" Andre reached into his pocket. Sterling's hand twitched toward his gun, instinct kicking in. "Hand out of the pocket. Now." Andre moved slowly, deliberately. He pulled out a phone. He didn't dial 911. He didn't dial a lawyer. He tapped a speed dial contact labeled Chief Miller. Sterling froze. Chief Miller was the chief of police for the entire metropolitan area. Andre put the phone to his ear, never breaking eye contact with Sterling. "Miller," the voice on the other end answered after one ring. "Andre? We're still on for dinner at the club, right?" "Cancel dinner, Jim," Andre said, his voice echoing in the silent street. "I'm at the corner of 5th and Centennial. I need you here, now." "What's wrong? Is everything okay?" "One of your officers just assaulted my mother." "What? Who?" "Badge 4922. Sterling. He broke her cane. He's writing her a ticket for jaywalking while she's crying on the pavement." There was a pause on the line. A heavy, terrifying pause. "Don't move," Chief Miller said, his voice turning to steel. "I'm 5 minutes away." Andre hung up the phone and slid it back into his pocket. He looked at Sterling, who was suddenly sweating despite the air-conditioned breeze from his car. "You asked who I was," Andre said softly. Sterling swallowed hard, the first seed of doubt taking root in his gut. "Yeah. Who are you?" "My name is Dr. Andre Washington," he said. "I'm the Deputy Mayor of Public Safety. I oversee the police budget, the Misconduct Review Board, and your pension." Sterling's face went white. The color drained out of him so fast it looked like he might faint. The ticket book slipped from his numb fingers and hit the ground. The drama was just beginning. The intersection of 5th and Centennial had transformed from a bustling city street into an arena. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of traffic that seemed a world away. The bystanders who had been murmuring in shock moments before now stood transfixed. They sensed the shift in power, the sudden inversion of the food chain. The predator had just realized he was standing in the shadow of a much larger beast. Officer Rick Sterling stared at the man in the navy suit. Deputy Mayor of Public Safety. The words bounced around his skull, failing to find purchase because his brain refused to accept the magnitude of his mistake. He knew the name, of course. Washington. The new administration's hatchet man. The guy who had been elected on a platform of police reform and accountability. The guy who had famously said in a press conference just last week, "There is no blue wall thick enough to hide a bad badge." And Sterling had just snapped his mother's cane in half. Sterling tried to speak, but his throat felt like it was filled with sand. He looked down at Beatrice, who was now being helped to her feet by her son. She looked small, frail, and utterly sympathetic. The broken cane lay between them like a smoking gun. "I didn't know," Sterling stammered, his voice cracking. The tough guy razor persona evaporated, leaving behind a terrified bully. "She didn't have ID. She was waving the stick." Andre Washington didn't look at him. He was busy dusting off his mother's knees, his movements tender and precise. "Are you dizzy, Mama? Do you need water?" "I'm okay, baby," Beatrice whispered, though she was still trembling. "I just want to go home. Please, Andre, just take me home." "We're going home soon," Andre promised, "but not yet. We have to finish this." He turned back to Sterling. The look in Andre's eyes wasn't just anger, it was clinical. It was the look of a surgeon deciding where to make the first incision. "You didn't know?" Andre repeated, stepping closer. He was taller than Sterling, and he used every inch of it. "You didn't know she was my mother? Is that your defense? That you only brutalize elderly blind women when they don't have powerful sons?" "That's not what I meant," Sterling backpedaled, holding his hands up, palms out. "Look, sir, Mr. Washington, it was a misunderstanding. From my angle, it looked like a weapon. Protocol states, 'Don't quote protocol to me.'" Andre cut him off, his voice lashing like a whip. "I wrote the revised use of force protocols for this city. Section 4, paragraph 2. Officers shall exercise extreme caution and de-escalation techniques when interacting with citizens exhibiting physical disabilities. You skipped de-escalation and went straight to property destruction and intimidation." "She was resisting," Sterling tried again, though the lie felt heavy on his tongue. "Resisting what?" Andre gestured to the sidewalk. "Gravity?" "She's 72 years old, officer. She has glaucoma. She can't see you. She was scared." At that moment, the wail of sirens cut through the air. Not just one siren, but a chorus of them, approaching fast. Sterling turned to look down the avenue. 3 police cruisers were weaving through traffic, lights blazing. Behind them was a sleek, black, unmarked sedan, the chief's car. Sterling's heart hammered against his ribs. He looked at the crowd. People were filming. Of course they were. At least a dozen phones were held aloft, capturing his humiliation in high definition. He could see the red record dots. This was going viral. He was going to be the face of police brutality on the 6 o'clock news. He needed an out. He needed to fix this right now. "Mr. Washington," Sterling whispered, leaning in, desperation leaking from his pores. "Look, can we talk about this? Just man to man. I can drop the ticket. I'll buy her a new cane, the best one money can buy. We don't need to make this a circus." Andre looked at him with genuine disgust. "You think you can buy your way out of this? You think a new cane fixes the fact that you humiliated a woman who has spent 40 years teaching Sunday school and feeding the homeless in this city?" "I'm sorry," Sterling hissed. "I'm apologizing, okay? What else do you want?" "I want your badge," Andre said simply. "And I'm going to take it." The black sedan screeched to a halt behind Sterling's patrol car. The door flew open, and Chief James Jim Miller stepped out. Miller was a bear of a man, with white hair and a face that had seen too many crime scenes. He looked furious. He didn't walk. He stomped. "Officer Sterling!" Miller barked. Sterling snapped to attention, purely out of reflex. "Chief, sir." Miller ignored him and walked straight to Beatrice. His demeanor softened instantly. "Mrs. Washington, I am so sorry. Are you injured?" "Hello, Chief Miller," Beatrice said, recognizing the voice. She had met him at a charity gala the previous year. "I'm shaken, but I'm all right." "I'll have a medic check you out just to be safe," Miller said. He turned to Andre. "Andre, talk to me." "He profiled her," Andre said, pointing a finger at Sterling, who was now trembling visibly. "He harassed her at the crosswalk. When she didn't move fast enough for his liking, he grabbed her. When she tried to explain she was blind, he took her cane, her medical device, and snapped it over his knee. Then he threatened to arrest her for jaywalking." Miller's face turned a shade of purple that suggested an imminent stroke. He slowly turned to face Sterling. "Is this true, officer?" Miller asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Chief, she was non-compliant," Sterling stammered. "The cane, it looked modified. I had to neutralize it." "Neutralize a cane?" Miller roared. "Are you out of your mind? You neutralized a grandmother." "I followed procedure," Sterling shouted, panic making him reckless. I have discretion in the field. You can't hang me out to dry for doing my job. Your job is to protect and serve, not search and destroy, Miller yelled back. Give me your badge, now. Sterling took a step back, his hand hovering near his gun belt again. It was a subtle movement, but everyone saw it. Don't do it, Rick, a voice came from the crowd. It was one of the other officers who had just arrived, a sergeant named Kowalski. Don't make it worse. Sterling looked around. He was surrounded. His own colleagues were looking at him not with solidarity, but with pity and judgment. He was radioactive. Slowly, with shaking hands, Sterling unpinned the silver shield from his chest. He handed it to Miller. Gun too, Miller said. Sterling unbuckled his holster and handed over his service weapon. He felt lighter, but in the worst way possible. He felt naked. You are relieved of duty pending an immediate internal investigation, Miller said formally. Go home, Sterling. Get a lawyer. You're going to need a good one. Sterling looked at Andre, expecting to see triumph, but Andre just looked tired. Get him out of my sight, Andre said. As Sterling walked toward his personal car, head down, the crowd began to boo. Someone threw a plastic water bottle. It bounced off his shoulder. He didn't react. He just got in his car and drove away, the shame burning his face. But as he drove, a dark thought began to form in Rick Sterling's mind. He wasn't going to take this lying down. He knew things. He knew about the dirty laundry in the department, and he knew something about Andre Washington that the public didn't. Or at least, he thought he did. Sterling reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. A private investigator named Saul. Saul, Sterling said, his voice hard. I need dirt. On Andre Washington. Deep dirt. I don't care what it costs. Washington? Saul laughed on the other end. The golden boy? He's squeaky clean, Rick. Nobody is clean, Sterling muttered, glancing at the empty passenger seat where his badge used to be. Find me something. I'm going to burn him down. 3 days had passed since the incident at Centennial Park. The video, predictably, had gone viral. It had 4 million views on Twitter and was the lead story on CNN. Justice for Bear was trending globally. Beatrice was recovering at Andre's penthouse apartment. She was physically fine, but her confidence was shaken. She hesitated before walking into rooms, tapping the walls nervously, even though she knew the layout. It broke Andre's heart to watch. Andre was in his home office, staring at the city skyline. The fallout had been swift. Sterling was suspended without pay. The mayor was calling for his termination. It seemed like a slam dunk. But Andre knew guys like Sterling. They didn't go quietly. They were like cornered rats. They bit. His phone buzzed. It was his assistant, Sarah. Dr. Washington, there's a situation. What kind of situation? A reporter from the City Chronicle just called. They received a tip about you and your mother. Andre frowned. What kind of tip? They're saying the incident was staged. Andre laughed, a harsh, bark-like sound. Staged? My mother is blind. He broke her cane. There were 50 witnesses. Not that part, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They're claiming that you and Chief Miller targeted Sterling, that this was a hit job to remove a whistleblower. Sterling. A whistleblower? Andre rubbed his temples. The guy has the IQ of a ham sandwich. What is he blowing the whistle on? The pension fund, Sarah said. The reporter says Sterling claims he has evidence that you've been embezzling from the police pension fund to pay for your mother's medical treatments. He says that's why you attacked him, to discredit him before he could go public. Andre sat back in his chair, stunned. It was a lie, of course, a bold, audacious, insane lie. But in the court of public opinion, the truth often mattered less than the scandal. Who is the reporter? Mike Reynolds. Andre groaned. Reynolds was a muckraker. He didn't care about facts. He cared about clicks. If Reynolds ran the story, it would muddy the waters. It would turn a clear-cut case of police brutality into a political squabble. Sterling would get to play the victim. "Get legal on the phone," Andre said, "and get Chief Miller." Meanwhile, in a smoky dive bar on the outskirts of town, Rick Sterling sat across from Mike Reynolds. Sterling looked rough. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. He was drinking whiskey, neat. "You sure about this, Rick?" Reynolds asked, tapping his notepad. "Accusing the deputy mayor of embezzlement is heavy stuff. If you're wrong, they'll bury you under the jail." "I'm not wrong," Sterling lied. He pushed a manila envelope across the table. Inside were bank statements, forged, of course, by Saul the PI, showing transfers from the pension fund to a shell company. "I found these while I was doing some off-the-books filing," Sterling said. "I was going to bring them to the DA, but Washington found out. That's why he came after me. That show in the park, it was a setup. He knew I patrolled that beat. He sent his mother there to provoke me." Reynolds looked at the documents. They looked authentic enough. He licked his lips. This was the story of the decade. "If I run this," Reynolds said, "you know your career is over anyway, right? You'll be the source." "My career is already over," Sterling said, slamming his glass down. "I just want to take him with me." Sterling left the bar feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. He didn't care if the documents held up in court. He just needed to create enough smoke to survive the immediate fire. If he could make the department afraid of him, they might cut a deal. Give me my pension and let me retire quietly, and the story goes away. That was the plan. But Sterling had made a fatal error. He assumed Andre Washington was just a bureaucrat. He assumed Andre played by the rules. He didn't know about Andre's past. Before Andre was a deputy mayor, before he was a PhD, he had been a prosecutor. And before that, he had grown up on the streets that Sterling pretended to police. Andre knew how to fight dirty. The story hit the Chronicle the next morning. Hero or villain, suspended cop claims, deputy mayor staged park incident to hide embezzlement scheme. The city exploded. The narrative shifted instantly. The internet trolls came out in force, calling Beatrice a crisis actor and Andre a corrupt politician. Andre stood in his kitchen, reading the article on his tablet. His hand gripped the device so hard the screen distorted. "Don't read that trash, baby," Beatrice said, sensing his tension as she sipped her tea. She was using a spare cane Andre had bought her, tapping it gently against the table leg. "They're coming for us, Mama," Andre said quietly. "He's lying. He's trying to burn the house down." "Then pour water on it," Beatrice said, calmly. "The truth is water. Lies are just fire. They burn hot, but they burn out fast." Andre looked at his mother. She was the strongest person he knew. She had raised him alone after his father died in a factory accident. She had gone blind, working double shifts as a seamstress, the strain and undiagnosed diabetes taking her sight. She had never complained. "I'm going to destroy him," Andre said. "Not politically, legally. I'm going to make sure he never wears a uniform or holds a job again." "Just make sure you don't lose yourself doing it," she warned. Andre went to his office. He didn't call the mayor. He called an old friend, Marcus Vance. No, wait, can't use Vance. He called his friend, Julian. No, can't use Julian. He called Thomas. Thomas was a forensic accountant who used to work for the FBI. "Tom, I need you to trace a forgery," Andre said. "Sterling leaked documents. They're fake. I need you to prove where they came from." "Give me 2 hours," Thomas said. 2 hours later, Thomas called back. "You're gonna laugh. Try me." The metadata on the bank statements, Sterling, leaked. They were created on a cracked version of Adobe Acrobat. The registered user is Saul Goodman Private Investigations. Real original. Saul? Andre recognized the name. Saul was a bottom-feeder PI who lost his license 5 years ago for blackmail. And, Thomas continued, I pulled Sterling's financials. The guy is broke. But 3 days ago, he withdrew $5,000 in cash, probably to pay Saul for the forgery. We got him, Andre said. Wait, there's more. I looked into Sterling's past arrests, the ones that got swept under the rug. And? One of them was 3 years ago. A young kid named Leo. Sterling arrested him for possession. The kid claimed Sterling planted it. The body cam footage was corrupted. The kid did 18 months. So, Leo is out, and I tracked him down. He says he saw Sterling do something else that night. Something worse. Andre's eyes narrowed. What? Sterling didn't just plant drugs. He stole cash from the kid's apartment. A lot of it. Drug money, sure, but theft is theft. And Leo says Sterling has a stash, a go bag he bragged about. Andre smiled. It was a cold, shark-like smile. Where does he keep it? Leo says Sterling has a storage unit in Cicero, under his mother's maiden name. Andre hung up. He dialed Chief Miller. Jim, Andre said, get a warrant for a storage unit in Cicero. I'm going to send you the address. We're not just getting him for assault. We're getting him for grand larceny and forgery. Rick Sterling was feeling good. The news cycle was spinning. His lawyer told him the department was hesitating on the firing proceedings because of the whistleblower status. He was winning. He drove his rented sedan to the U-Store ET facility in Cicero. He needed to get some cash. If things went south, he planned to head to Florida until the heat died down. He punched in the code at the gate. He drove to Unit 404. He rolled up the metal door. Inside were boxes of old clothes, some fishing gear, and a safe. Sterling knelt by the safe. He spun the dial. Click. The door swung open. Inside were stacks of cash, about $80,000. Money he had skimmed off drug busts over the years. His retirement fund. He reached for a stack of hundreds. Police! Hands in the air! The shout echoed off the metal walls of the storage unit. Sterling spun around, reaching for his waistband, but he had no gun. Standing in the doorway was Chief Miller, flanked by 4 SWAT officers, and behind them, looking impeccable in a grey suit, was Andre Washington. Rick Sterling, Miller announced. You are under arrest for grand larceny, forgery, filing a false police report, and obstruction of justice. Sterling's knees gave out. He slumped against the safe. How? He whispered. How did you find this? Andre stepped forward. He picked up one of the stacks of cash. You picked the wrong blind lady, Rick, and you definitely picked the wrong forgery artist. Saul flipped on you about 10 minutes after we showed him the warrant for his office. Sterling looked up at Andre. The arrogance was gone. The defiance was gone. There was only fear. I can cut a deal, Sterling pleaded. I know things about the precinct. I can give you names. We don't need your names, Andre said. We have your records. We have your stash. And we have the video of you breaking my mother's cane. Andre leaned down, his face inches from Sterling's. You wanted to teach her a lesson about respecting authority? Well, consider this your lesson in accountability. You're not a cop anymore, Rick. You're just a criminal. Cuff him, Miller ordered. As they dragged Sterling away, kicking and screaming, Andre didn't feel joy. He just felt relief. It was over. The gavel didn't just bang. It sounded like a coffin lid slamming shut. The courtroom, which had been buzzing with the low murmur of reporters, sketched artists, and curious onlookers, fell into a suffocating silence. Judge Patterson sat high on her bench, a figure of absolute, unyielding authority. She adjusted her glasses, looking down at Rick Sterling, not with anger, but with a profound, clinical disappointment that cut deeper than any shout could. Sterling stood at the defense table. He was still wearing his charcoal suit, the one he thought made him look respectable, the one he thought would remind the jury that he was one of the good guys. But the jury hadn't looked at him. They had looked at the video. They had seen the sneer on his face as he broke Beatrice's cane. They had seen the bank records provided by the forensic accountant. The blue wall of silence hadn't just cracked, it had crumbled, leaving him exposed and naked before the law. "Rick Sterling," Judge Patterson began, her voice echoing off the mahogany walls. "You stood before this court and asked for leniency. You cited your years of service. You cited the stress of the job." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But the job of a police officer is to be a shield for the vulnerable. You, Mr. Sterling, were not a shield. You were a sword. You used the authority entrusted to you by the people of this city to prey on the weak, to fabricate evidence, and to destroy the lives of those you swore to protect. You took a grandmother's independence and snapped it over your knee because her walking speed inconvenienced you. That is not stress. That is malice." Sterling's lawyer, a sweaty public defender who knew this was a losing battle, stared at the table. Sterling's hands were shaking. "This can't be happening," he thought. "I'm a cop. We don't go to prison. We get suspended. We get pensions. We don't go inside. For the charge of aggravated assault, guilty. For the charge of grand larceny, guilty. For the charge of forgery and obstruction of justice, guilty." Judge Patterson leaned forward. "I am sentencing you to a total of 8 years in the Illinois State Penitentiary. No possibility of parole for the first 5. Remand is immediate." 8 years? Sterling gasped, the air leaving his lungs as if he'd been punched. "Your Honor, you can't. Put me in protective custody. You can't put me in Gen Pop. I'm a cop. They'll kill me." "You should have thought about that before you became a criminal, Mr. Sterling," the judge said coldly. "Bailiff, take him away." The transition was jarring. 1 minute, Sterling was a citizen with rights. The next, he was property of the state. The bailiffs, men he used to joke with in the break room, didn't make eye contact. They grabbed his arms firmly, spinning him around. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked onto his wrists, tighter than necessary. "Guys, easy," Sterling whispered as they marched him out the side door. "It's me. It's Razor." "Move it, inmate," the bailiff grunted. The ride to the county jail processing center was a blur of nausea and terror, but the real nightmare began at intake. Sterling was stripped, not just of his clothes, but of his identity. His charcoal suit, his tie, his polished shoes, everything that made him feel like a man of status, was shoved into a plastic bag. He was forced to shower in ice-cold water under the watchful eye of a correction officer who smirked the entire time. "Lift your arms, turn around, cough." It was the same routine Sterling had forced hundreds of young men to do. He had laughed at them then, made jokes about their humiliation. Now the humiliation was his skin. He was tossed an orange jumpsuit. It smelled of industrial detergent and old sweat. It was too big, hanging off his frame like a sack. He put it on, and with it, he put on the target. "Listen to me," Sterling pleaded with the intake sergeant, a man named Davis. "You have to put me in SEG. You have to put me in the SAU, Special Housing Unit. If I go to the pods, I'm dead." Sergeant Davis looked up from his clipboard. "SU is full, Sterling. Besides, the warden says no special treatment. You wanted to be a tough guy on the street? Go be a tough guy in Block D." "Block D?" Sterling's blood ran cold. Block D was the violent offender unit. It was the jungle. The walk to Block D felt like a funeral procession. The heavy steel doors buzzed and clanked open, one after another, leading him deeper into the belly of the beast. The air grew thicker, heavier, smelling of bleach, unwashed bodies, and tension. The guard stopped at the gate of the common area. "Open 4, he radioed. The gate slid open. The guard shoved Sterling inside and didn't follow. The gate slammed shut behind him. The noise in the pod, the shouting, the dominoes slamming on metal tables, the televisions blaring, stopped instantly. 40 pairs of eyes turned to the door. Sterling stood there, clutching his bedding roll to his chest like a shield. He tried to project confidence, tried to find that razor swagger, but his knees were water. He scanned the room. He saw tattoos. He saw scars. He saw men who had spent years hardening their hearts against the world, and he saw recognition. "Yo," a voice called out from the upper tier. "Is that Officer Sterling?" A ripple of laughter went through the room. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of hyenas spotting a wounded gazelle. "It is!" another voice shouted. "That's the guy from the news, the blind lady basher." Sterling backed up, his spine hitting the cold bars of the gate. "I don't want any trouble," he stammered, his voice pitching high. "I'm just doing my time. Doing your time." A figure detached himself from the shadows of a corner table. He walked slowly towards Sterling. He was young, maybe 22, with a shaved head and a teardrop tattoo under his left eye. He moved with the fluid, dangerous grace of a predator. Sterling squinted. The face was familiar. It was a face from 3 years ago, a face he had smashed into the hood of a patrol car, a face he had laughed at while he planted a baggie of heroin in his pocket. "Leo," Sterling whispered. "Hello, Razor," Leo said, stopping 5 feet away. A circle of inmates began to form around them, cutting off any escape route. The guards in the control booth were curiously absent from the window. They had decided to take a very long, very deliberate coffee break. "Leo, listen," Sterling said, sweat pouring down his face. "That was a misunderstanding. The system, you know? It forces us to do things." "The system?" Leo laughed, shaking his head. "Nah, man, that wasn't the system. That was you. You took my money. You planted that dope. You sent me here for 3 years. My grandma died while I was in here, Sterling. I missed her funeral because of you." Sterling looked around for help. There was none. Only orange jumpsuits and cold stares. "I can fix it," Sterling babbled, desperation taking over. "I have a lawyer. I know people. I can get your case looked at." Leo smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're a little late on that, officer. See, your new friend, Dr. Andre Washington. He's a thorough man. When he started digging into your files, he found my case. He reviewed the body cam footage you tried to delete. The DA called me this morning." Leo stepped closer, invading Sterling's personal space. "I'm being exonerated, Rick. I'm walking out of here on Tuesday. Full release. Clean record." "That's great, Leo," Sterling said, a nervous smile twitching on his lips. "See? Justice worked out. We're good, right? We?" Leo tilted his head. "There is no we. I'm leaving on Tuesday. I'm going back to my life. But today is Friday. That means I have 3 whole days left in here. 3 days with nothing to do." Leo cracked his knuckles. The sound was loud in the silent pod. "And you know what the boys and I were just talking about?" Leo asked, gesturing to the circle of inmates closing in. "We were talking about karma. We were talking about how it's unfair that an old blind lady gets her cane broken, but the man who did it gets to walk around with 2 good legs." Sterling dropped his bedding roll. He put his hands up. "Leo, please. I have money. I have a stash." "You have nothing," Leo roared, the calm facade breaking. "You have no badge. You have no gun. You have no backup. You are in our house now." Leo didn't throw the first punch. He just nodded to the man behind Sterling. Sterling felt a heavy hand grip his shoulder and spin him around. A fist connected with his stomach, doubling him over. He gasped for air, falling to his knees, the exact same position he had forced Beatrice Washington into months ago. He looked up, expecting mercy. He found none. "This is for the cane," Leo said quietly. The circle closed. The beatdown wasn't chaotic. It was methodical. It was the release of years of pent-up anger from men who had been bullied, framed, and harassed by badges like Sterling's. It was brutal, ugly, and undeniable. By the time the alarms finally blared and the guards rushed in to break it up, Rick Sterling was curled in a fetal ball on the concrete floor. His lip was split, his eye was swollen shut, and his leg, his right leg, was bent at an angle that nature never intended. As they loaded him onto a stretcher to take him to the infirmary, Sterling looked through his one good eye. He saw Leo standing by his cell door, arms crossed, watching him. Leo didn't look angry anymore. He looked at peace. "Don't worry, Razor," Leo called out as the stretcher passed. "You've got 8 years to heal up. Welcome to the neighborhood." Sterling tried to speak, to curse him, to threaten him, but all that came out was a broken whimper. He closed his eye as the infirmary door swung shut, the darkness enveloping him. He was finally, truly alone. And for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be powerless. 6 months. In the grand scheme of a life spanning 72 years, 6 months is a blink of an eye. But in the life of a city like Chicago, and in the heart of a woman like Beatrice Washington, 6 months can feel like a lifetime. It was enough time for the seasons to turn, for the brutal, bone-chilling winter to loosen its grey grip and surrender to the fragile, hopeful warmth of spring. The ice that had coated the sidewalks of the South Side had melted away, leaving the pavement bare and ready for new footsteps. The trees in Centennial Park, which had stood like skeletal sentinels witnessing the ugly incident back in the fall, were now erupting in vibrant greens and budding whites. The city was waking up. Beatrice stood in the foyer of Andre's penthouse, adjusting her scarf. She looked different. The hunched posture of a victim was gone, replaced by the upright, serene bearing of a matriarch. She reached out, her hand seeking the familiar, but her fingers didn't close around the taped-up handle of a cheap aluminum drugstore cane. Instead, her palm rested on the smooth, cool grip of a masterpiece. It was a custom design, a gift from the engineering department at the local university, people who had heard her story and wanted to give her something unbreakable. It was woven from aerospace-grade carbon fiber, lighter than a feather but stronger than steel. It was tipped with a high-density polymer that sent clear, crisp vibrations up to her hand, painting a sonic picture of the world around her with every tap. "Ready, Mama?" Andre's voice came from the hallway. He sounded lighter too, the perpetual furrow in his brow, the weight of the inquiry, the press conferences, the depositions. It had all started to fade. "I've been ready since breakfast, Andre," she teased, opening the door. "You're the one who takes 20 minutes to choose a tie." Andre chuckled, stepping up beside her. He offered his arm, not as a crutch, but as an escort. "I have a reputation to uphold. The deputy mayor can't look like he got dressed in the dark." "I get dressed in the dark every day, baby," Beatrice quipped, "and I still look better than you." They stepped out into the city. The air was crisp, smelling of wet earth and exhaust, that singular perfume of urban spring. As they walked down the block, the rhythm of their movement was different. Before, Beatrice had walked with caution, anticipating obstacles. Now, she walked with purpose. Tap, tap, slide. The sound was sharp and confident. The neighborhood had changed, too, or perhaps the people in it had. As they passed the corner bodega, the owner, Mr. Henderson, called out from sweeping the stoop. "Morning, Miss B. Looking sharp today. Fresh cannolis at the bakery. I heard they saved a box for you." "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," Beatrice waved, her direction unerring. A group of teenagers, usually loud and boisterous, quieted down as she passed. One of them, a boy who couldn't be more than 16, shouted, "Respect, Miss B!" She smiled. It wasn't the pity she used to feel radiating from people. It was solidarity. The video of her standing up to Sterling, of her son defending her, had done more than just ruin a bad cop's career. It had galvanized a community. It reminded them that they didn't have to shrink away. Andre watched his mother with a swelling sense of pride that nearly choked him. He had spent his career fighting abstract battles, budget variances, policy wording, union contracts. But this was tangible. He had protected the one person who mattered most. "We're coming up on it," Andre said softly, as the terrain under their feet changed. The sidewalk became smoother, the ambient noise louder. They were approaching the intersection of 5th and Centennial. For months, Beatrice had avoided this corner. The memory of the crack, the sound of her independence snapping, was a trauma trigger that sat deep in her psyche. The shouting, the fear, the feeling of the hot pavement against her knees. It was all tied to this specific geography. Beatrice stopped 10 feet from the curb, her hand tightened on Andre's arm. "It's okay," Andre whispered, sensing her hesitation. "We can go around. We can take 6th Street. Beatrice took a deep breath. She inhaled the exhaust fumes and the scent of blooming tulips from the park. She listened to the hum of the traffic light box. "No," she said, her voice firm. "We are not going around. I live here. This is my street. I am not going to let one bad man shrink my world." She stepped forward, her cane tapping the yellow tactile paving at the edge of the curb. The traffic light chirped, the signal to walk. But before they could step off the curb, a figure moved into the intersection. It was a police officer. He was young, Hispanic, with a uniform that looked a size too big for his lanky frame. He wasn't wearing sunglasses. He wasn't slouching. He was badge Yachtidabra 55001, Officer Martinez. He saw them. He didn't see a nuisance. He didn't see a target. Officer Martinez raised his hand, halting the line of cars that were inching forward to turn right on red. He blew his whistle sharply, once authoritative but not aggressive. He walked to the center of the crosswalk, ensuring the box was completely clear. He turned to Beatrice and Andre. He didn't shout. He didn't demand. "The intersection is clear, Mrs. Washington," Martinez called out, his voice respectful and projecting clearly over the engine noise. "Take your time. I've got the traffic holding." Beatrice turned her head toward the voice. A smile, genuine and warm, broke across her face. "Thank you, officer," she called back. Andre nodded at the young cop. A silent exchange of understanding passed between the two men. This was the new protocol. This was the Washington reform in action. It wasn't just words on a memo. It was a young kid stopping traffic for a blind woman because it was the right thing to do. They stepped into the street. As they walked across the asphalt, Andre thought about the man who used to patrol this beat. He thought about Rick Sterling. "I got a call from the DA yesterday," Andre said quietly as they reached the halfway point. "Oh?" Beatrice asked, focusing on her tapping. Sterling's lawyer tried to file an appeal, arguing cruel and unusual punishment because he's in general population. Apparently the other inmates aren't very fond of him. He's spending a lot of time in the infirmary. Andre waited for a reaction. He wanted his mother to feel vindicated. He wanted her to relish the karma. But Beatrice just kept walking. She didn't stop. She didn't scoff. She didn't smile with vengeance. "That's sad," she said simply. Andre blinked, surprised. "Sad? Mama, he terrorized you. He's getting exactly what he gave out." "It's sad that he wasted his life being so small," Beatrice clarified. "He had a badge. He had authority. He could have been like that young man back there, helping people cross the street. Instead, he chose to be a bully. And now he's in a cage. I don't need to be happy about his suffering, Andre. I'm just happy he can't hurt anyone else." They reached the other side of the street. Beatrice stepped up onto the curb, her new cane tapping the concrete with a solid, finalizing thud. She turned back for a moment, auditing the space one last time. "What are you listening for?" Andre asked, pausing beside her. Beatrice tilted her head. She heard the distant laughter of children in the park. She heard the whoosh of the bus kneeling to pick up a passenger. She heard the polite exchange between Officer Martinez and a driver. "The city sounds different," she said, clutching her son's arm. "For a long time, all I could hear was the anger, the sirens, the shouting, but today it sounds like a neighborhood again." "It is, Mama," Andre said, squeezing her hand. "We made sure of that." "Good," she said, turning away from the street, her back to the past. "Now come on. If we don't get to the bakery soon, Mr. Henderson is going to eat all the pistachio ones, and I know you've been craving them." "I'm the deputy mayor. I can probably pull some strings to get a cannoli," Andre joked. "You might be the deputy mayor out here," Beatrice laughed, tapping his shin playfully with her cane. "But in that bakery, you're just Andre, and I'm still your mother. So pick up the pace." They walked down the sunlit avenue, a mother and son, leaving the shadow of Centennial Park behind them. The nightmare was over. The bully was gone. And Beatrice Washington, armed with her unbreakable cane and her unbreakable spirit, walked freely into the rest of her life. Justice isn't always swift, but when it arrives, it hits like a freight train. Rick Sterling thought his badge gave him the right to bully the weak, but he learned the hard way that true power isn't about dominance. It's about protection. Beatrice Washington didn't just get a new cane. She got her dignity back, and the city got rid of a monster. If this story made your blood boil and your heart cheer, do me a favor. Smash that like button so we can spread this message. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of karma and justice served cold. And tell me in the comments, do you think 8 years was enough for Officer Sterling? Or did he deserve more? Let's talk about it. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.